so many of the leaders at my age, I'm 59, who could have still been in the room, smartest of a generation. Some of that, like honestly, super intelligent, knew their stuff, in many cases, knew their Bible inside out. What was it? It was character. It was like they were jerks. Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. Hey, it's our 10th anniversary, and we're celebrating today as my good friend Mark Clark joins us, and we flip the mic. We're going to talk about all things podcast, how this started, how it grew, how we got to over 34 million downloads, what happened in the background, and a whole lot more. I hope you enjoyed this really transparent conversation with my good friend Mark Clark. And because it's our 10th anniversary, we want to give something to you. Today is the final day, release day for this video, is the final day where you can be one of the winners for our Big Green Egg giveaway. So we got one grand prize winner who's going to get an extra large Big Green Egg, same griller smoker that I have, accessories, and special steak delivery. Two runners up are going to get mini maxes. These are really cool, smaller versions of the egg that you can take with you on the road or use them at your house. It's open to Canadian and US residents. And what you do, drop a comment here on YouTube and then enter the draw at cnlp.live. Today's episode is brought to you by my brand new course, The Art of Navigating Church Conflict. You can reduce the conflict at your church and unite people around a shared and growing mission in as little as 5 minutes a day by using my brand new course, The Art of Navigating Church Conflict. Visit artofchurchconflict.com to learn more. And today's episode is brought to you by Glue Plus. There are people moving into your city every day. And the question is, will you be there to welcome them with love? With Glue Plus, you can send 50 postcards every month to people who move into your area. You can go to glue.us/movers and use the code CAREY20. You'll get 20% off your Glue Plus membership. And now, my Flip the Mic conversation with Mark Clark. Well, very different kind of interview today. I got my buddy Mark Clark.
Love it. Hey guys, how you doing? What a joy and an honor to be doing this interview with. I mean, look at Carey Nieuwhof's got the microphone. I got no logoed microphone. How did you figure this out?
Well, it's magnetic, so
okay, so we can totally move it. Okay, perfect.
We'll get you another one next time you're in town.
Okay, good.
We'll get you another one.
We got a new setup here. What is it? Why are we doing this, Carey? What's happening right now?
10 years of podcasting.
10 years, ladies and gentlemen, with this man. Unbelievable. 10-year anniversary.
10-year anniversary.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you. Well, we're working out of my basement.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is what you've done. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. So you're bringing the questions today.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm bringing the questions. So I mean, 10-year anniversary, Carey Nieuwhof Podcast. He's been just feeding the church, all of us, for so many years. And here we are in the middle of your basement, in the middle of Podunk. I mean, not to expose any.
Well, thank you.
Podunk nowhere in Ontario, Canada, okay, where there's cows and horses running around everywhere. And yet you have built just an incredible ministry with literally millions of people in America, Canada, all over the world, globally. First question out of the gate, 10-year anniversary, how is that possible? That you did this. You took a podcast, you were pastoring a church, leading a church. Yeah. Take us back to the beginning. What made you go, this is what I want to do with my life? Because you're amazing at it. We're celebrating you today and what you've done. Take us back to the beginning, that shift between your pastoring a church, leading a church, growing church. It's amazing. And you go, this is maybe something I want to do. I want to influence globally. Take us back to the beginning.
Well, let me nuance that. Yeah. I never thought about influencing globally. I was just like an early adopter. It was my wife, Tony, who told me about podcasts. I remember we were still living at our old house, which you never saw because we've been friends for 10 years or so, almost around the time of the podcast. I think we became friends. And she just said, have you heard about podcasts? I'm like, I don't know what that is. And she goes, lawyers are using it. We have a law background. And so I hadn't heard about it, but give it a year or two and podcasting went mainstream. So I started listening to podcasts and I thought, this is a really cool format. Yeah. And there wasn't a lot in the church space. There was the Catalyst podcast. That was about it.
Okay. And was that like Brad Lomenick was doing it or somebody else?
Lomenick, Lomenick did everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Cool.
Yeah. So Brad was doing it and there were other people doing it too. I think Ken Coleman was on that in the early days. But the interview format got really big in the business world. And I was listening to that in the leadership world. And I thought, nobody's doing this other than Catalyst in the church space. And at the same time, I'd started to do a lot of speaking at conferences. So I would get into green rooms and I would listen. I would have great conversations. Like you and I would have great conversations. And I'd always leave going, I wish everybody could have heard that. Right. So I thought maybe I could do a podcast. Thought about it for a couple years. And then I was still working full-time at Connexus as the lead pastor. And so I thought, how do we do this in a really scalable way? So as an experiment, in September of 2014, I started a bi-weekly leadership podcast. This was only every other week for the first few months.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Spent the summer banking episodes.
So what did you leadership podcast? So what did you draw from? Just your own leadership principles, and then you just talk to people, or did you interview? Like, what was your first episode?
Well, first episode
I should have probably researched this.
Yeah, you should.
You're the interviewer.
Thank you for.
You're great at this.
Thank you for doing all the show prep, Mark. I really appreciate.
So I memorized your first 20 episodes. What was your first episode of this show?
Well, I did a preview, and it was Andy Stanley. It was episode 1.
Awesome.
Because I wanted to do the interview thing because the interview thing was repeatable for me.
Of course. Yeah.
It was like, otherwise I'd have to prep another hour-long talk, et cetera. So I wanted to do that. And I had known Andy for a number of years. It was a big ask. And he was kind enough to say yes. So we did and then, I got feedback because I was looking at the format. So the church leaders who were doing podcasts back in the day were often not doing interview stuff. They were doing solo podcasts. You write a blog post. It's like, here are the 5 things about lead, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
So you do that. And I'm like, well, then I have to write new content. Don't want to do that. And everybody who I talked to said, go short, go short, go short. People have the attention span of a goldfish. That was new information. Right. You want 8 minutes, 10 minutes, a super easy commute, 30 minutes. I'm like, no good conversation I've had has ever been 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's always longer.
Yeah, that's good.
And they leave you wanting more. So I think the first episode was 38 minutes. And I did 38 minutes, and that seemed really long, but it went really well. And now they're on average an hour, hour and a quarter, hour and a half.
Very long format.
Very long form.
Yeah.
But again, you got to kind of commit to a format, and it was audio only at the beginning.
Sure.
And then I had worked so far ahead in the summer of 2014, tapping all of my friends hey, can we do one? Frank Beeler was one of the early episodes. He was at Elevation at the time, And I think I had to re-record that one. And interestingly enough, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. This may now be off the internet, but I tried an earlier.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Yeah, that's right.
I don't know the story yet.
That's right. So the first time I got canceled, it was I called it Leadership Lessons with. It was 2013.
Okay.
And I would post videos on my blog because I'd been blogging.
Sure.
I was posting videos on my blog in 2013 on a Friday.
Okay.
And nobody watched them. Nobody. I would YouTube them and nobody was watching. So I tried 5 of them and I'm like, this is a failure because everyone said the future is video, the future is video. Sure. This is even 2013. And I was in the spare bedroom upstairs on the top floor where Tony's office is now.
He builds an empire from the bedroom of Oro Mediate or whatever town this is.
Well, Oro Mediate. Yes. Stop. You've been here enough. You can't just
There was a lady churning butter outside your window 10 minutes ago. Look at it's incredible feat.
So I do live in the country with incredible internet. But it's right by lake.
So, sorry. So you go, yes.
No, I switched bedrooms. So it was up there. And then I put that on ice because I'm like, okay, nobody's listening.
Nobody's watching these. Yeah.
And then I reimagined it the next year. Well, maybe just audio format. And so when I launched it as audio, I got all 5 of those guests from my failed video podcast in 2013. Yes. And I didn't have an audio version of it.
Okay.
Back to do the audio cast.
Interesting.
And then I had so many episodes in the bank by, I think, month 2 or 3, I was like, okay, we could do this every week.
Right.
So that's when it became a weekly podcast.
And it became your passion to do it because, how did you get the data? What was the data on that first episode? Was 500 viewers? Was it 200 to 1,000? What was it? That you went, oh, this is fun.
Out of the gate.
Do you remember?
I've got the stats. Yeah. I'm going to say we're at 34, 35 million downloads now.
Wow.
But I think that first year was 500,000.
Wow.
It was out of the gate. It was strong.
Wow. So how many episodes would you have had that first year?
50-ish.
Okay, so you were dropping one every week.
About one a week, maybe a little less.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So 34 million down. I mean, did you ever expect that this podcast would be this big?
No. Anybody who tells you, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people with large churches, large companies. I mean, I've interviewed some of the best leaders in the world. If you get the healthy ones, they will always tell you, I had no idea. I mean, I was hoping somebody would listen.
Right.
Chris Vache, do you know Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris and I went to the Blue Jays game, I think the day before.
That's a Canadian baseball team.
Baseball PM. and so we're sitting there, and I remember going to the game with him. I don't remember this. And it was like, hey, Chris, tomorrow the podcast launches.
Oh, he goes, first one.
What are you hoping? I said, I hope somebody listens. I'm not sure anybody is going to listen to this show. Right. So that was exactly... Because I had tried it on video and it had flopped. Like I don't think my mom even watched the videos, right? Yeah. So I thought, like, what? I don't know where anybody's going to listen. And then it started to get momentum, and but did I think we'd have? I mean, in my wildest dreams, I thought maybe if I do this for a number of years, we get 1 million downloads. Like, but 1 million. It's like when you have $1 in your bank account as a kid. Yeah. You think, wouldn't it be nice to have $1 million? You might as well say a zillion or a trillion. Like it's so unreachable. Right. And then to reach that within a few years or 2 years or whatever it was, incredible.
So when you saw those first numbers and you started doing those first episodes, what was like the jolt or the feeling of pleasure and satisfaction that it gave you? Like, what was the thing behind the thing?
Definitely dopamine hits, but I'm a numbers guy. You do.
You have like traction back here.
Like back there on like Instagram,
I got another Instagram
followers.
I'm like, all right. There's either a ghost in here or someone else started to follow Carey Nieuwhof on Instagram because it's freaking me out.
Those are gifts from Rich Birch.
Yeah, I was like the middle of the night. I'm like, bro.
Yeah, he's so kind. Anyway, there's that, which is like good incentive. It was like validation. Cool. But I think the happiest thing was I got to bring my audience the conversations I imagined I could bring them, and I was starting early on to get insights out of leaders that I didn't know, they maybe never said, and I wasn't trying to trick them. Sure, we'll talk about that, but. It was that joy of like bringing, and that became addictive. And so, good. But to think that I'd be doing this a decade from now, I'm not very good at thinking about the future. Okay. Like, will I be doing this 10 years from now? And the answer is, I don't know, man, because I don't know what's going to happen to podcasting.
What's your 10-year plan? Do you have one?
Yeah, I would say right now, my 10-year plan is I want to bring quality conversations to leaders, particularly next-gen leaders, church leaders, and people who are invested in the church. I want to bring quality conversations to them in whatever form the future will bring. So good. Like, if you think about 20 years ago, there was no podcasting, right? Like 2004, it didn't exist. Yeah. In 2034, is it going to exist? I don't know. Will you be doing broadcast TV in an era of like streaming? Right. Well, if the medium shifts, I'll shift with the medium. So we added video. Yeah, we've done different things. Yeah. But like, I'll have to see how to deliver that. Yeah. But I don't think long form is going away. Yeah. And I think actually it's going to become, Nir Eyal, who was a guest on the podcast, talks about the attention economy. And so everybody's being so distracted, attention of a goldfish, all this stuff. I think if you go long, you go deep, there is a hunger for that. Like you think about your preaching. Yeah, of course. You're not going shallow. Oh, yeah.
You're preaching. It's way too long.
It's way too long.
Think about your preaching. It's way too long.
No. But like you can hold court. You can hold court for 40 minutes.
Because you're giving people something that's deep, but it's something for their life, and that's wonderful. So a friend just texted me and I said, hey, I'm doing the 10-year anniversary. So it's cool to like do the 10-year and then think 10 years down the road. And he said, thank Carey for these 10 years because I literally remember the first episode and it's informed and changed my life as a leader. And he's one of our best leaders at our church. He's leading a church of 2,500 on a weekend, killing it, one of the great preachers of America. He'll be an amazing leader for the next 30, 40 years. And he's going, I remember your first episode and I've been with you ever since. So thank you, Carey. You're killing it, man. Thank you.
That is so humbling.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people? I don't know. It's like, remember, well, again, Nixon, Kennedy, that election in 1960.
Yeah.
It was like the closest election. You were there.
Yeah, I was there right on reporting live from the Nixon-Kennedy debate. Yeah, sorry, go ahead and make your point. This is why you're a much better interviewer than me.
Mark's already on to another subject.
So anyway, here's the fourth point. I want to answer my own question, Carey.
No, but it was like the closest election to that point in U.S. history. But when they polled everybody after Kennedy's assassination, who do you vote for? 70% said Kennedy. I feel like I'm sure your friend was there for episode 1.
Yeah.
I hear that so often. And people talk about really meaningful episodes. So I'm really grateful. Did I think that this was going to go where it went? Not in a million years. Not in a million years. And I'm really grateful for my team, really grateful. Yeah. We've always had help on this podcast. You know, Holly Beth helped on the podcast for a long time. Toby has produced every single episode. Toby Lyles, huge shout out.
Hashtag give it up to Toby. When I hear Toby, I just think like The Office.
Yeah,
Is his personality anything like that, Toby?
No, people actually like Toby, so that's good.
I love it. Good job, Toby.
Toby's amazing.
Yeah,
and
great.
Then Aaron Ward led the podcast for a number of years, Carly Wolinski for the last 2 years, and then I've got my whole team over the years that has helped.
This is so Carey Nieuwhof. You're thanking a bunch of people behind the scenes that nobody knows or not a lot of people know who listen. That's what makes you you. It's genius. I love it. I look forward to the next 10 years. This is going to be awesome. Okay, let's get into some questions about your leadership, the pod, the stuff you want to share for us. Let's get going. I got some good questions. Okay, some icebreakers, because you know you carry yourself very professionally. You're always interviewing all these big wigs who want to be on there, and you're focused on them. But we want we want you to suspend humility a little bit and make Carey the hero of this pod. So. First off, what is one fact that no one knows about Carey Nieuwhof?
One fact.
One fun little fact that no one knows.
I know you gave me these questions ahead of time,
but you didn't think of them.
No, I'm not you. I don't think on my feet. One fact that nobody
knows. Nothing you like.
I would say, all right, here's something I don't talk about a lot.
Hit us.
I think my trust issues as a leader go back to when I was 12 years old. We were jumping bikes. Do you remember ramps? Like building a ramp for your bike?
Yeah, of course.
I had this beautiful 3-speed Stingray. It was called a Stingray.
Okay.
And I'm going like as fast as you possibly can at 12 years old to clear this ramp. And my neighbor across the street sticks a stick in my spokes and I go flying.
What a little...
I haven't trusted anybody since.
What was his name?
Not a person. I can't say. What if he listens to this podcast?
It's a shout out.
What if he listens to this podcast?
He is not listening to my podcast.
Anyway, he was on episode 392 of my show. No, I'm kidding.
And his name was Craig Groeschel.
Yeah, no. Craig would not have done that.
I'm kidding.
Actually, he had a brother named Craig. I'll give you that much.
So he put a stick in your spokes, and you went over the top.
And I went flying, and yeah. So I don't know why that came to mind.
Just all right. So that's why you
kind of shattered my faith in humanity.
Okay, so you don't trust people, but you didn't have to get any reconstructive teeth surgery.
It's not even a
story.
Like
yeah, no.
It's not even. A story.
Well, so that's something nobody knows about.
No one knows about because I've never talked about that publicly. Right. Every other aspect of my life has been chronicled publicly because I've written too many blog posts and done too many episodes. There's almost no material.
With how much content you put out? Okay,
5 books, thousands of blog posts, 600 episodes. Are you kidding?
Unbelievable.
There's nothing.
Unbelievable. Nothing left. Okay, next up, what is fun for Carey Nieuwhof?
Being out on the water, dude. We were trying to get out on the boat, but it didn't work out with the schedule.
No.
But I love being on the boat.
That's your happy place?
You've been on my boat, haven't you?
Yeah. That's your happy place? Being out on the water?
It is my happy place, man. I went
before you got here,
before you got into town.
Yeah.
I went to the marina and I thought I paid somebody to detail my boat. It appears they either did a terrible job or it did not happen because I don't think I was billed for it.
Okay.
But I just detailed my boat for 2 hours and I was so happy.
That is your happy.
Makes me so happy.
Getting in the detail, which comes to one of my next questions in a second about your personality. But okay, so being out on the boat, and what is it about? What is it about being out on the boat that's like, okay, this is where it's at?
There's something about the water. There's something about like it's a nice 21-foot inboard outboard.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, cutting the water on a quiet day with very little wind, taking friends out, floating around, taking people water skiing, and then just watching the sunset.
Yeah, what is it about the water?
It's so calming. I call it the 2-hour vacation because we can be out for 2 hours and I can be so relaxed.
I love that.
Just like
that's great.
The rest of the world doesn't exist. I could have been having a crappy day. I'm out on the lake. It's like,
no one can reach me here. What do I care about this? Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so talk about favorite maybe Carey Nieuwhof movies. I don't think you talk about films and movies very often.
No, I'm not.
It's not that kind of that.
Like, I'm not.
No, but you like movies though.
I like movies. I was thinking about this.
What is
again,
it, like a couple?
I'm blanking.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen. We could talk about movies I haven't seen. Do you know? I haven't seen the Star Wars trilogy. Do you know?
The original
I've
Star,
never
like
seen.
1977?
I saw it in 77, fell asleep halfway through, so I don't know that counts. I was like 12.
I saw it
going
in
back.
77.
I did. I saw it in 77, man.
That's funny.
I got a couple of years on you.
All right.
But I saw it. I think I fell asleep halfway through.
Okay.
I've never seen Lord of the Rings.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and ladies and gentlemen, it was a great podcast. Thanks for coming, Carey.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I love comedies.
Okay.
Anything Will
talk
Ferrell,
about that.
Ben Affleck.
Okay, there you go.
Zoolander.
Yeah, all that nonsense.
All
I like
that stuff
That's
in the
fun.
late 90s, early 2000s. Cool. Totally into that.
That's cool. Okay. Give us your evaluation of the Taylor Swift.
Oh,
the T-Swift.
Fan.
You're a fan? Yeah.
Big fan.
New album?
Yeah.
Pretty sweet.
I think I'm a fan because I like her music. Yeah. Not ashamed to say that.
Yeah.
But I also think she's an absolute fascinating study about this cultural moment. And
you said something. Yeah, you said something the other day. You said something today to me that was really a great kind of exegesis of the T-Swift approach to marketing, and to talk about that. That was a great little take.
Oh yeah, she. It was just a piece I read that. I mean, she's a billionaire, right? I mean, she makes more in interest in the first 5 minutes of this podcast than most of us make in a year.
Right.
Right. So I mean, she's got money.
This episode's brought to you by Taylor Swift.
By Taylor Swift, billionaire step by her jet, by her plane. So, I mean, you think about it.
If I say this episode's brought to you by, does that mean that it gets people's attention and then they end up sponsoring the show? Is that not how it works? Because if I just keep saying like Toyota or whatever, like, will they go, oh yeah, let's sponsor you. Here's
look, I have promoted the Big Green Eggs so many times over the years.
They've got to be paying you.
No.
How do they not pay you?
I got one repost my story.
Rubber glove from them in the mail? Anything?
Nothing. Not even a set of tongs.
Green Big. What is going on here, Big Green Eggs?
Tongueless.
Unbelievable. So, they should be sponsoring.
No,
you've probably sold more Big Green Eggs than any person.
Yeah. Brought to you by Sea Ray, if anyone's listening. Okay, my favorite boat. That's my boat. Okay, my boat's a Sea Ray, if you're listening. Right. But again, I'm not expecting
Okay, so
Taylor Swift, she could buy anything. Yeah. She could out-Kardashian the Kardashians if she wanted to. I mean, you got that level of money, you can do anything. And the article was saying she dresses like she went to the mall.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure she has her dress for the award show and, her costumes and everything for tour. But one of the reasons she does that is she wants to keep connected to her fans.
Yeah.
She wants to look like, so when you see her coming in and out of a club or an event with Travis Kelce, she's not usually dressed to the nines. And they're like that for every teenage girl, like you have 3 teenage daughters.
Yes.
For every 25-year-old, office clerk kind of thing who follows her, they can relate to her better. And I thought that's something really good.
It's genius.
For leaders
crowd.
To think about. Don't outpunt your coverage.
I love that. Okay, what's a Carey Nieuwhof hot take? I was on one of the pods that our staff does. Morgan and Leslie run this amazing pod. Am I doing this right? For mainly focused on women, and they start the pod by saying, what's a hot take that every guest has, something that like everyone else is like, what? And then they come in, what's a Carey Nieuwhof? Like, here's the thing, guys. This is actually a thing.
This is going to get me canceled.
Okay.
I think sabbaticals are overrated.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone I talk to who's tired in leadership is like, I got to get to a sabbatical. In fact, I'm running a poll right now as we record this.
Okay.
What's your most effective strategy if you burned out to recover from burnout? And the number one answer is, I took a sabbatical. I took some time off. And I've never had a sabbatical. You've never had a sabbatical, right?
Not to this
You're doing
point.
okay.
I was planning on announcing one next week, but
well, let me kill that for you now.
I'm just kidding. No, I don't know if I can set my life up for that. I'd rather set my life up where I don't need a sabbatical.
Bingo.
No critique on anyone, but like
that is the point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. Like you've got a nice rhythm. You just preached 6 sermons in the last 48 hours. Yeah. You preached 3 times at Connexus. You did 3 on video today. Now we're here recording 2 pods, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But you know what? You're going to get home. You're going to see Aaron. You're going to see the kids. You're going to go golfing. You're going to write for Bayside on the weekend, all that stuff, which is fantastic. Yeah. I think that's the key. And people are like, I'm going to run dead to the finish line. I'm going to take a sabbatical. I'm going to get well. And what they don't realize is they'll be roadkill the first month back. You've got to change your rhythm.
That's good.
And so I'm not against sabbaticals, but I think if you're holding them out as the silver bullet that this is going to save me, and once I have a sabbatical or once I have a Sabbath regularly, if you're running in the red 6 days a week, your Sabbath isn't going to save you.
That's good. That's really good. And oftentimes what happens, at least in bigger organizations, I think in smaller organizations, a church of whatever, you could go on a sabbatical, come back and pick it up. Oftentimes in big organizations, you disappear for 3 months. The org's going without you.
Oh, and if you're a good leader, it's running as well or better.
Right. And then you come back and like, hey, I'm still needed.
Theoretically.
Or there's some guy, a lot of men and women who goes about, they don't come back.
Yeah.
You realize like they get some distance from the organization and they're like, I'm out.
But if you can run at a healthy pace, have you had this on vacation? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Where you're gone for 2 or 3 weeks, and at the end, you're like, I'm ready to go back.
Like, for sure.
I get that all the time. I'm like,
jacked to get
I am
back.
Now bored enough.
Yes, I'm bored enough.
Like, this was fun.
100%.
And you love, like, the pool, the beach, the sun.
Love that. 100%.
But you also get daily doses of it where you live and how not just where you live, how you live.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who live in a beautiful place like you do, who like live in cubicle purgatory and never 100%. See the light of day.
100%.
You make your own misery.
That's a really good. And I think that like you said, I've been, whether I take a vacation for a week or 2 and it's reading by the pool and hanging out with the girls and by the time I'm done, I'm ready to get back in and you're jacked to get work done and excited, so that's great. Setting your life up in a way where you don't have to disappear for 3 or 4 months, probably the better route. But I understand when people hit a wall. So let me just segue that quickly, because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was you are known as someone who worked themselves, or whatever it is, you can tell us, into a burnout scenario, and you wrote a book about it, Didn't See It Coming, which is a fantastic book for any leader out there who's feeling tired and burnt out and like anxious and at the end of themselves and going, what do I do? That's the book to get. Didn't See It Coming. Go look it up on Amazon. Buy right now. This episode brought to you by Didn't See It Coming.
Thank you.
By Carey Nieuwhof. No, but serious. No joke. That is amazing. But you tell that story in that book. You're very vulnerable. You go right into your whole mental state and mental illness. So take us through a bit of maybe that story, just the quick. I know you don't want to go on about it for an hour because you've gone there. And then what would you say to people, leaders, moms, dads, whatever, business leaders, pastors, about how to avoid that? Hey, you're going off a cliff, burnout. You wore yourself out.
Yeah, well, I did. I mean, you said you worked yourself into burnout. I did. And
it was pastoring.
That was my 30s. I started a church. It was a handful of people. We would have all fit in this office.
Yeah.
No problem. And it started to grow by God's grace. And it was a good story. And I didn't have a good formula to scale it. So in my head, more people equals more hours. Throw into it the fact that you're working for God. So time off can't be good. More hours has to be good. It has to be faithful. So it was pretty well-intentioned, but messed up in my head.
Yeah.
And, we grew to 700-800 people on the weekend. And it was the biggest church I was a part of to that point. And I just, kept trying to swim faster and faster and ended up drowning.
Yeah.
So it was
700-800 people, by the way, is a mega church in Canada.
Yeah,
Triple
when you have
church.
cows for neighbors, as you said.
Yeah. We're going to talk about
Here we
that.
are in Oro Medonte, which
yes,
you,
Medonte,
like Nieuwhof, you don't know how to pronounce. So
I think I called it oral mediate when I was preaching yesterday, which I don't know what that means.
So and the other thing too is arrogance as a young leader. I thought people were telling me, man, if you keep going like this, you're going to burn out. I'm like, burnout's for weaklings. I'm not a weakling. Like, I'm not burning out. And I burned out. Like, I burned out. And
so what was the first indicator that you were like, oh, something's wrong?
I thought nothing was wrong until I hit the wall.
Right.
And then when I lost all my motivation, I showed all the signs of clinical depression and so on. Then I'm like, okay, something's wrong. Looking back on it, probably for 2 or 3 years running into it, I was redlining it. But you're young,
running
on empty. But you're young, you're strong. The rules don't apply to you.
Yeah.
My wife was saying for years, this is not good. You're not healthy. Other people were saying that, but I just ignored everybody. Wow. And the confusing thing is the church kept growing. So I'm like, well, God must be blessing this. So why would I stop? So it was all kinds of convoluted reasoning in my head. And again, when you're not healthy, part of not being healthy is you're not thinking straight. Right. So I wasn't thinking straight. So it really took like running into a wall. And, I'd spoken at the biggest conference I'd ever spoken to date in Atlanta in 2006. And I thought I was on top of the world. Apparently knocked it out of the park. You know that feeling when you gave a talk and you just know it connected. And it was a home run. It was one of those. And I flew back from Atlanta to Toronto. And when we landed in Toronto, it was this giant sucking sound. I just fell off a cliff and that was it.
Wow.
And I was done. So that took me months to get out of. But looking back on it, yeah. I mean, if I ever got close to feeling like that again, like I was 3 years before burnout, I would really pay attention to that.
So for people listening to this, leaders, pastors, whatever, what would be like 2 or 3 bullet points to watch out for? Like, hey, you don't even know what you don't know, but you're reaching,
feeling
you're burning out.
Feeling numb.
Numb?
I was numb. I was emotionally numb.
Just new, like no ups and downs, no highs and lows.
A lot of flatness, or when the emotions came out, they were inappropriate. So, like we took a minute to get set up. I took a minute to get set up because it was a new configuration. It took me like 5 tries to get both mics working and recording properly. Then today we were joking around, laughing, singing, doing stupid things. When I'm not well, that sends me over the edge. I would have been ugh.
Right.
That was a 3 out of 10 problem, but I would react as a 12 out of 10. Conversely, you might tell me that something bad happened to Aaron or one of your girls, and I'd be like, oh, that's too bad, but on the inside, I don't feel anything.
Right.
So, you should, as the scripture says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. So my emotions were broken. That was one.
Wow.
Secondly, irritated with the people around me. And a third sign is, I'll give you 4. A third is your passion fades. Yeah. I just wasn't that passionate anymore about things. And another one was everything and everybody drained me. I mean, there are draining people, let's be honest. You get draining people in life. Yeah. People get draining. Yeah. But when everybody drains you, when everything drains you, like we're going out for dinner tonight, I'm excited for that, man. Yeah. Like I'm like pumped. But when I wasn't well, everything felt like a chore.
Wow.
Everything just felt too difficult.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. That's really good. So let's hear a little bit more about your personality profile. We were joking earlier about like Enneagram. Like, I don't know if you've looked into that, whatever. I know people aren't huge fans of the Enneagram because it has ties to different things. Aside from all that, what's your personality profile? What's your this is the Carey Nieuwhof? Because we all, most of us who follow Carey Nieuwhof, we know you cut your lawn, you got your lawn lines, you hashtag lawn lines. We look at you and go, okay, that's a type A guy. Like he's jacked about detailing his boat. He's jacked about his lawn lines. What is that personality profile in you?
Yeah, I thought I was. So if you know the Enneagram, I thought I was a 1.
A 1.
Okay, one is a perfectionist. You've seen my garage.
Okay. Yes, it's very clean.
Very clean.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
So I like to have everything in its place for everything. I'm not a 1, I'm an 8. An 8 is a challenger. Yeah. That means I have a big personality, large and in charge. I take command. And that is both good and bad, like any type. Of course. So the unhealthy side, you're a bulldozer in a china shop. You just destroy people. Yeah. Anything justifies the end. Sure. Hey, if we got to 10,000 people and you're the roadkill, so be it. Right. We didn't need you anyway. Right. So that's the negative side.
I don't know who you were talking about there, but
and when I was unhealthy, that would leak through, not necessarily from the platform, but to the people closest to me, my wife, my children, my staff, the team.
Because for an 8, from what I understand, because I've been profiled as an 8, and I don't really look too deep into these things, but one of the things is justice drives you.
Yes.
A sense of justice. So you're constantly, you justify, bullying behavior, if it's, or whatever behavior, like you're saying a bull in a china shop or whatever. You justify a bit of that because the cause that you're fighting for is just. It's the poor, it's the
mission justifies.
You want to.
We're reaching unchurched people. Shut up. Yeah. So then you get the healthier side, and that has been a focus of mine for the last almost 20 years.
Yeah, that's so good.
I want to show fruits of the Holy Spirit, and you can do that. And so I look at it this way: I want the people closest to me to have the best experience of me. Yeah. So I want Tony to get the best of me, not the worst of me. And on my bad days, she gets the worst of me. Carey's so nice for this podcast, and then when I'm home. And
here's the thing about Carey that y'all have to know too, though. We're holding these things because
we can't afford stands. We have no stands. Maybe in year 11 we'll get a stand.
So, anyways, we should acknowledge that for the.
We should just say for
why
those
are they
of you who are
holding
watching,
these random?
We have a wired
Bob
microphone.
Barker
Bob Barker. Remember the long mic in the 70s?
Oh, it's the best.
That was crazy, man. It was a baton.
So we're out for dinner last night, me, you, and Tony, and you guys got to know, like, I don't know how much you talk about your marriage on your pod, probably not a ton, but he has an awesome marriage.
If you listened, you would know.
I do listen. I listen all the time. I'm just saying, you probably don't cite your marriage every 20 seconds when you're talking to emperors and rulers of nations.
Sorry.
So he's sitting there and we're talking, and he's still in a learner mode. Okay. And this about you is so brilliant and genius and wonderful for every young leader and human being to know that you're however old, let's say 50, and
That's generous.
And still you're sitting there and you're looking across the table at me and asking me questions. I'm like, you're like, how are you a good dad or a good husband? I'm like, I'm not sure I am. And you're like, yeah, but and then you're looking at Tony and you're like, hey, what he just said about being like, am I like that? Because I want to be like that. And you're still learning. And I think, don't you think that that's part of like for me, that whole level 5 leader humility, you are a humble leader. And I think that has been one of your secret sauces of success, is that you're humble. You're so, I don't know what personality profile tells you that you're like, you're a curious person, a curious leader. And you have to be humble to be curious, because pride-filled people aren't curious people. They're not like, give me more information. There's something I don't know. But you're curious, and that's what makes you a great podcaster. You're constantly going after information from people. Where did that come from? Why are you like that?
That was a decision. So 50 was a big birthday for me. It happened a number of years ago. And as I closed in on that decade, I really did a lot of reflection, a lot of praying, a lot of thinking. And, I was starting to move into areas of expertise where you have enough reps, where you become an expert at things, or you're seen to be an expert. My favorite definition of expert is someone who's not from your hometown. It's exactly what an expert is. Right? You just bring someone in. It's like, they're an expert. Anyway,
that's true.
But I remember watching this documentary on PBS. And it was just a random show one Saturday. There's this guy who I think is 80, a professor. He's in like the tweed jacket, sitting up straight.
Yeah.
And he goes, interesting question. according to the latest research, what I'm discovering is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, you're 80.
Right.
What are you still doing?
Researching.
Research. And then I thought, but there's something so compelling about that to be 80 and still a student. And I thought, I want to be that guy when I'm 80.
Yeah.
And so I really made a concerted effort to be curious, to be one of my goals this year.
Great.
Less of a teacher, more of a student.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I started going to events because I eventually, it happens when you do what we do, is you end up only going to things where you're paid to be there and to speak. I'm going to go to things where I pay to be there and I'm the student. Yeah. And that I think is really good. And it makes me, first of all, if I think you're right, I hadn't made the link. This is really helpful between curiosity and humility. But I do see the link between pride and knowledge.
Yeah.
Because knowledge puffs up.
Sure.
And I think if you get to my stage of life, it's so easy to be cynical because you do know a lot.
That's good.
And then you're like, well, dude, here's why that isn't going to work.
And you're not cynical. The thing about you, Carey, is like, and people talk about this, you have these so many podcasts or interviewers that are the gotcha interviewers, right? I'm going to have so-and-so on my pod and I'm going to go, okay, so-and-so, well, here's the thing. You got caught in that thing and there's this blog about you. Your interviews are so positive and optimistic and hopeful. How have you held on to that in the midst of your own, you went through a thing, you came out why are you so positive and just interested in everybody's story?
I decided when I launched the podcast, I didn't want it to be a gotcha show because there were enough of them then. There are more of them now.
Yeah, I bet.
And the thing is,
and blog posts too. Like there's whole blogs of people who make money off ambulance chasing Christians who make mistakes.
100%. And I decided, number one, a lot of the people I interview are my friends. Yeah. And I started with my friends.
Yeah. Good.
And, and obviously I've had to pull some episodes down of people I interviewed. There were things about them I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
And I pulled those episodes down and hope I don't have to pull any more down in the future.
Yeah.
But I'm not out. I don't mind asking hard questions. But people have opened up about things on my show that they generally don't open up about. And I think it's because they trust me. Yes. I also tell every guest, you have editing rights. So if something doesn't come out the way you want it to, I'm not after that headline. Sure. You let me know, we'll cut it out.
Sure.
Some people would say, well, is that censorship or whatever? No, it actually means I want Craig Rochelle back on my podcast again next year.
Yeah, of course.
And I want this to be a destination.
Yeah.
And if you get a reputation very, very quickly as an interviewer. And so now, we're sought out. People want to be on the pod. They want to be on the show. And I'm delivering something that I think is going to be helpful and encouraging to my listeners, to the leaders listening, because there's enough gotcha places. And I don't know that I could sleep at night knowing that my headline and my gain and my financial reward came at someone else's expense.
Yeah.
That doesn't sit
That's
well
good.
with me.
That's really good. Okay, so shift here a little bit. So you at some point in your life transitioned from church leader. I mean, you have a great story where you're running these small little 2 or 3 different churches, these Presbyterian churches, and you're pastoring them. And then you plant Connexus and it grows. And we're talking about like you said earlier, we're sitting in the middle of nowhere here. Okay. His neighbors are cows and horses.
We're in my basement.
Yeah.
We're sleeping in the spare room next door.
Yeah. And you've
That's
built
my house.
You've built an empire, okay, of podcasting and writing and newsletters and articles and blogging. You have built literally an empire. You work for yourself. You do very well. You've been very successful. All of these amazing things that everyone in America and Canada knows you from your little house in the middle of nowhere, guys. I'm going to tell you, there's a cow outside. There's a horse running here. I saw a lady churning butter 5 minutes up the road. I mean, there's nobody here. There's no electricity. It runs on batteries. It's crazy. In your basement of your house in Canada, which nobody even knows about, you transitioned from church leader. You grew a big thing. You're pastoring, you're preaching, amazing communicator, world-class. How did you know, first off, how did you know about that transition, that you knew this is what I wanted to do? And then second, I want to get into how did you build this amazing thing that you're doing? So first, transition from church, local church leadership, church planter, preacher, and then I want to start doing a global leadership. I want to influence this globally with a podcast and a writing and all. How did that transition happen?
There was no plan. It was little by little, step by step, shots in the dark with nothing. I can't show you a vision from 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Right.
I realized after I burned out, I need a hobby because all I did was work. So I thought, I enjoy writing. I'm a communicator. So I started a blog. And I blogged off and on for a little while. And then I had a friend tap me on the shoulder to write a book. So I wrote a book. And then I thought, it'd be fun to do a solo book. And then I was really getting into listening to podcasts. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do a podcast one day. So I launched that 10 years ago. But I was still working full time at the church. And then I just felt like, okay, my season is coming to an end here at the church. I had a successor who's done an incredible job.
How old were you then?
I was 49.
Okay.
Yeah, when I started to feel this stuff. And I handed things over to Jeff when I was 50.
Partly because you started to be passionate about these other things, which this is kind of what happens,
that
right?
Was it was 90%, I think I'm done, and 10% passionate about other things.
Sure, yeah.
The story often gets told that it's 90% passionate about other things. It was like 10% that, 90% like, think my season's coming to an end. I went a little bit early because I was turning 50, Jeff was turning 40. He's a decade younger than me. And I thought, if I stay 5 more years, I don't know whether he'll be around to take over the reins. Like, people don't wait forever.
Right.
And so I thought, this is a good time. We had momentum, we had margin in the church. It's like, here you go. So after a period of discernment, we did that. But, there was no plan. I stayed on teaching for years and took a pay cut to do that. Not a huge one, but like meaningful. Like, we were putting 2 kids through school. We definitely noticed the pay reduction. And I didn't have a financial plan, just faith.
Yeah.
And then,
so good.
Just put one foot in front of the other and started speaking a little bit more because my day-to-day was freed up at the church. And then I thought we'd do a course. So I did my first course. We were totally experimenting.
What was your course?
It was called the High Impact Leader, which became At Your Best.
Yeah.
And then you and I did a preaching course. I added some other courses. We did the Art of Reaching. And I'm like, this course thing works. And then a company kind of grew out of that.
Yeah.
So it was honestly putting one foot in front of the other, curiosity, constant experimentation, and not really knowing, a couple of principles, no debt. So we didn't take out a loan for any of this stuff. And, there were times where it was like, wow, if that check doesn't come in, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill.
Wow.
But we made it.
Wow.
And, we're very grateful. And so I wake up surprised every day, as you and I were talking about at dinner last night, grateful. Like, how on earth did this become our life?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, so I really feel like it's a gift from God. It's to be stewarded. I'm responsible for it. I'll give an answer for it one day.
Okay, so that's beautiful. So that's high level stuff. I look at you and I go, how you got here were a lot of smart decisions, though, and a lot of hard work. Yeah. So what were a few of those smart decisions? If someone's sitting there going, man, like, not everyone starts a podcast from his basement in the middle of nowhere, Canada, and becomes a worldwide. I mean, you were speaking at, the Alpha conference last week. Obviously, you've spoken at all everyone knows, there's some strategic decisions you made along the way. What were those if you were to try?
One of the first ones was, don't worry about the money, worry about the quality of the product and how you serve your audience. That's great. I was half blogging for 4 or 5 years. And then in 2012, I'm like, double down, go serve leaders and write really good stuff.
Yeah.
And it blew up. My email list started to grow, the blog traffic like 10x'd in a year kind of thing. And then I had entrepreneurs in my ear, friends going, got to monetize this, got to monetize. Do you know how much this is worth?
Right.
I'm like, I'm not worried about that because my brand is trust. Yeah, and what I want to do is I want to build a relationship with leaders. I want to spend time with leaders. And that's what I want to do.
Right.
And I said, if I do that right, the money will take care of itself.
Wow.
I didn't even take advertisers on the podcast for a couple of years. I had a strategic partnership with an organization in Atlanta.
Right.
They underwrote some of the costs in exchange for some other things, et cetera.
Right.
And so that was fine. I bought them out a number of years ago. But it was like, don't put the money first, and don't put the size of the platform first. Obviously, very motivational for me.
Yeah, of course.
But, don't put the size of the platform first. Put the quality of what you're doing and your audience first. God first, obviously. But, second quality, third audience. And that really helped. Another thing was don't get into debt. And that can make you make terrible decisions. And I didn't need to. I had a paycheck. I was still being paid as a teaching pastor. And people, they would say to me, well, monetize this. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe one day down the road we'll take sponsors and we'll figure out the financial model. But I'm like, I make money at a church. Like I'm paid not greatly, but decently for what I do. I'm able to pay the bills. We're able to put our kids through school because we saved. I'm not going to take that money now. I'm going to worry about that later. And then once we got to figuring out the monetization, it was easy. And it gave me the power to say no because we had lots of people lining up.
Right.
And we tried one or two partners in the beginning and then listeners had bad experiences. And I'm like, well, you're done. But I wasn't relying on the money.
Right.
So the tail didn't wag the dog.
Yeah,
so that was an important decision.
That's great.
Another one we've already covered, like when it came to the podcast and it came to the business model, I'm not the gotcha guy. Right. I'm not out. A great way to grow your traffic, whether that's video, audio, whatever you're doing. Scandal.
Yeah.
It's like, here's what fill in the blank mega church pastor did today and why you should unfollow them.
Yeah.
Number one, never written that headline, never will.
Beautiful.
But I can guarantee that would be a ton of traffic.
Yeah.
But you got to think, is that the kind of traffic you want?
Right.
Because those are all the people who want people to fail. Yeah. I want to find the good people on the internet. And believe it or not, Mark, there's a lot of good people on the internet.
100%.
Like great people. So those are some of the decisions early on.
I love it. You also strategically, and this is genius and sometimes looked over by young leaders. You built like a lot of great relationships, strategic relationships. Talk about that. Like you didn't just like appear in the Atlanta world or the North Point world or the Orange world or whatever. You built those relationships strategically and they served you very well. And I think there are a lot of young leaders. I was one of them. Not that I was maliciously not building relationships, but I was like so honed in on what I was doing. I'm just, head down, building the church. It took other people to go, hey, I think you should build a relationship with so-and-so. I think you should go meet Larry Osborne. I think you should. And it was like, okay, I guess I'll get up from my desk and go meet Larry Osborne. And then that relationship changed my life because it introduced me to this and introduced me to Ray. And those are huge and they're sometimes undervalued. Even our relationship, it was me reaching out to you on Twitter.
You did.
I DM'd you on Twitter before Twitter even existed and said, hey, we're two leaders in Canada. We should know each other. And that relationship sparked this thing. Talk about what was the thinking there? Like here you are in the middle of nowhere and you make this strategic decision connection to this well-known leader, Andy Stanley, and this church and all. That was a very intelligent thing that you did. I mean, it was genius.
Well, and it was a lot way beyond my control. And there's so much providence in that. I mean, part of that, because of the isolation of being here in Oro, north of Toronto, where I've lived for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
My friend was books. Like I was reading Rick Warren, never thought I would meet Rick Warren, let alone interview him, that kind of thing. Like reading Tim Keller, no idea I would ever interview Tim Keller, meet him. So it was like a hunger for leaders and going to the conferences, jumping on a plane, and then sitting in the back row and taking notes.
Of course.
And then, I met a guy that I had speak at a conference who knew Andy Stanley. And I had tried to get Andy, and Andy wasn't available. I was doing a conference here in Canada. But then he said, oh, you should meet Andy. So literally a year later, I'm meeting Andy Stanley. And then I'm in a boardroom with him. And I was there And this is really important because, I have a networker in me too, where it's like, hey, you should pay attention to me. And I'm like, okay, shut that voice up and just be a student, be humble, be grateful to be there, take notes, ask questions. And then, one meeting becomes two, becomes three, becomes a multi-decade relationship. And, I started the podcast with just, if you look at the first 10, 15 episodes, those are all the people I knew. It was like Andy was kind enough to be episode number 1. I had some others along the way, and I was just really fortunate. And then as I built that track record, what I'm told, like Craig Rochelle has said this, I think he said it publicly, and I don't think he'd mind if I say it, but he said, you were adding so much value to my life through what you wrote that I think he reached out to me.
Right.
I think it was Craig who reached out to me.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, oh my gosh, Craig Rochelle, I've been following him for 10 years. Like, are you kidding me?
That's cool.
And we become really good friends. So I think it's a question of trying to add value.
Yeah.
And I always had a dual target for the stuff I write.
Yeah.
One was the average pastor of a church of 150. The second was Andy Stanley, Craig Rochelle. Yeah. It's like, I want this to work for both audiences.
That's great.
And I think, it hasn't all, but for a lot of it, it really has. Sure. And so I think and then honestly, providence, good fortune, grace. Like I could not have been in all of the right places at the right time. And I'm not that smart and I'm not that charming. And God's grace has been all over this. So I feel very, very fortunate.
Well, I think you're very smart and charming. But that's another. Yeah.
Charming.
So we were talking a little bit yesterday about what I didn't really get your answers though. So I'll be interested. So we were talking AI. We were talking the future of podcasting. We're talking about, what's the future look like? So what are some of your thoughts on the future of where this medium is going? I mean, you've been doing this now for 10 years. Mm-hmm. You've grown a global platform over it. It's obviously taken off as this long form, we got the Joe Rogans of the world sitting there talking to people for 4 hours about nothing. And it's the most listened to pod on the internet. Mm-hmm. Some of these mediums are being rethought, blown up. A lot of these newscasters that we used to watch on these national news programs have been fired, and they just start their own shows in their basement, talking to thing, and that they have the audience. But specifically, I mean, that's media in general. But what are your thoughts about this? Like podcasting, the future, where are we going?
I'm glad I got in 2014. It's not impossible now, but it's much harder.
Yeah.
And you look at the show, one of the decisions I made early on, and I'm talking about the past, but I think it has implication for the future, is I didn't want it to cost a lot of money. I didn't want it to be super difficult to do. So it needed to fit into my lifestyle. So in the early days, we did video, but we didn't post it because it was 2014. Started posting video maybe 5 years ago or so, 4, I forget. But it was just a really good audio recording.
Yeah.
And it was easy. And literally, I launched the podcast for $1,000. It was a good microphone. And I'm still recording in GarageBand, man. That's free software.
Free GarageBand. We were talking about that earlier. This episode brought to you by GarageBand.
TM. So it was very easy to do, because if it became this all the time, like it's super easy. You're in town for a few days. You're staying at our place. Really easy just to reconfigure the studio and shoot this. So it's not that hard.
Yeah.
But if I had to like fly guests in all the time or all of a sudden the economics stop working because you're losing money. It just doesn't work. So it was like easy to reproduce. And that's why I went largely with an interview format. We're mixing that up right now on my show. Or I'm going to do some solo episodes because I've got the bandwidth. But I'm like, this has got to fit into a box. And it has to be technologically simple so that it works 99 times out of 100. And I think I've only lost 1 out of 600 episodes, like because of technical problems. And I have a very simple road kit. So when I do it on the road, it's $79 microphones that most people can't tell the difference between this $400 microphone and a $79
Well, you have
microphone.
the Carey, yours is 400. Mine's 100. Mine's 120 because it doesn't have the Carey Nieuwhof logo.
Notice I took the better mic. But I'm saying all that to say this. You look at podcasting now.
Yeah.
It's basically TV studios. I heard a great conversation with Cal Newport, who's been a guest on my show, Tim Ferriss, hopefully a future guest on my show. And they were saying that basically everyone now is pivoting to TV shows. What used to be TV,
Sure.
You got Rogan, he's got millions of views, he's got a studio, you got to fly in, Diary of a CEO. Like a lot of these things have basically become huge productions with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of built-in costs to it.
Yeah.
And the question is this what I want to sign up for in the future?
Right.
So Tim Ferriss has been talking about zigging when everyone else is zagging. And he's saying, I want to keep this minimalist.
Yeah.
Like he says, I might not even do video.
Right.
So what I'm thinking about is, what is the essence of what I bring to my audience? Yes, pay attention to where the industry is going. But if you want to sign up for that, you have to sign up for all of that.
Yeah.
And then what are the keys to success? You haven't asked me this question, but I get asked it a lot of times. Why do you think your podcast took off? There's a lot of reasons, including a lot of grace. But one of them is we've never missed a Tuesday. We have shipped for 10 years on a Tuesday, every Tuesday. In the early days, that was some 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls, and this isn't working and that isn't working. But now it's pretty automated and, it just sort of runs on autopilot. But a lot of people, they start early.
Wow,
they go really hard.
Sure.
And then they're like, oh, I missed a week. And then they missed a month. And then all of a sudden their show sputters and dies. So we haven't missed a Tuesday. And part of the reason we don't miss it is these episodes are easy to tape.
Yeah.
They're relatively low production compared to what we could be doing. And it's easily reproducible.
Yeah.
So I want to keep that going because the value is not in $1 million set and $1 billion worth of cameras.
Well, especially in the day and age of TikTok and these Instagram reels, people are doing raw, what I call, guerrilla style. Like I'm, in the film where I was going to bed last night watching a documentary on editing movies. And it's just interviews on editors. And then I was watching a documentary last night again on the 75 cuts that Alfred Hitchcock made in Psycho, in just the shower scene. That entertains me for 2 straight hours. So it's like, but the point of that is that there's people going, it's raw guerrilla style. It doesn't need to be super produced. It just is what it is. And you're saying that potentially is the future.
Well,
well as, even though some of these big guys are doing high production, for the regular Joe, you're saying don't let that hold you up?
Well, yeah. And what I'm saying is, what is the unique value proposition of my podcast? In my mind is I'm bringing the conversations that you and I would have at dinner.
Yes.
And you've been at dinner with me so many times, this is what we talk about.
Yeah.
And lots of fun stuff and other stuff too. But this is what we talk about. When I've got, Craig Rochelle, or I've got William Ury, or I've got Cal Newport, or I've got Simon Sinek on my show, I want to ask him the questions. I want to ask them the questions that every listener wishes they could ask them.
Yes.
And so I'm sort of a proxy for them.
Yes.
And I also want to ask them, particularly atheists. I had Scott Galloway on recently. I want to ask atheists about what they think about the Christian faith and what we should be doing differently. Or I had Tara Lee Cobble on, right? Well, give me the whole backstory of how you built this huge brand with 350 million downloads.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking through on behalf of my audience. Great. And so what happens with that? The value isn't like, oh yeah, we repainted the studio, and all that stuff. But the value isn't in the paint. Good. The value is in I'm bringing the backstory.
Okay, you brought up the Keller interview a little bit ago. And so that became, lots of views, lots of people talking about it was a great interview. So what are your top 2 or 3 interviews you've done and you go, that was great? Yeah. Either you were great or, I know you're more of the Larry King, let the guest shine.
Let the guest talk. I am a Larry King fan that way.
And Larry King's one of the great interviewers of all time. He's the guy I assume y'all study. But it's like, going back in your profile, what are those 2 or 3 that stand out? You're like, man, I think that one.
Well, Tim Keller, definitely near the top of the list.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what was it
the
about
privilege of meeting that man?
Yeah.
He was so formative in my ministry and my thinking. I have a Presbyterian background. To me, he's like, you look up Presbyterian in the dictionary, he's the poster boy. He should be, we should all be half as smart,
right?
Kind of thing. So that was a thrill. And I had 3 opportunities to interview him. Once in February of 2020, right before lockdown, we got into New York and spent a couple hours with him. It was incredible.
Yeah.
So that was great.
We missed Tim Keller.
Another one that actually you'll have a connection to this because I remember your reaction to it when I had Gordon MacDonald on the first time.
So good.
And he talked about.
I listened to that podcast and I cried. You did such a genius job of interviewing this guy and pulling out of him for a young leader like me. Well, young. I was 38 when I listened to it probably. Just the extraction of stuff. And I was just like, oh man, I cried. It was
you told
incredible.
me that. And I told Gordon that. And it was really powerful. So that.
But for our listeners, who is he and why did
Gordon MacDonald wrote a book in the 80s or 90s called Ordering Your Private World. He's written many. He sold millions of copies of that book. He had a tough period in his life where he went through a moral failure. It was out of character for him.
Yeah.
He submitted himself to a restitution process, reconciliation process.
And then he wrote a book called Rebuilding Your Broken World out of that.
Which is so good.
So good. And he was like he was like Clinton era advisor,
he was in the
spiritual
White House.
Advisor for White House presidents. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So no, he and in his 80s, honestly, is a role model. He kept his marriage. He and Gail are deeply in love. Yeah. Hope to do one more interview with him. You know, he's well into his 80s now, so it's getting a little more dicey. Third one I would say is John Crist. I did a John Crist interview.
Yeah, that was great.
In 2023. And I wanted to touch on his moral failure, being canceled and everything. Thought we'd do 1 or 2 questions. Turned out to be like one of the most honest conversations ever on the podcast. And him self-disclosing, self-revealing.
Yeah.
And I was happy with 1 or 2 questions. He went on for an hour. And it just never stopped about him saying, and this, and this, and this.
Right.
So those are a few that really...
So good.
Really come into mind. Obviously, you know, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But those are 3 that really stick out.
That's really good. So, okay, the future of things. What are 1 or 2 things that every young leader, I got 2 parts to this, young leader listening to this today should know? As you think about leadership, as you think about all the principles, young leader, up and coming, they're going to be in it for the next 20, 30 years. What would Carey Nieuwhof want to say to them?
Just gave this advice to a young leader in the Art of Leadership Academy today who DM'd me, and it really took him by surprise. He's like, I was hoping you'd tell me to take a course or something. And I'm like, just work twice as hard on your character as you do on your competency.
That's great.
I mean, you and I know this. We've talked about this so much. We've had way too many friends who aren't in ministry today because they've disqualified themselves. And, you know, unless I think I'm exempt, I'm not exempt. That could happen to me. It could happen to you. And so what I'm learning, not what I've learned, what I'm learning is I have to work twice as hard on my character. Because I'm going to read the books. I'm going to listen to the podcast.
Sure.
I'm going to go to the conferences. I'm going to sit down with smart people, wicked smart people.
Wicked smart.
Wicked smart people.
That's
I will
a good
sit down with them.
That's a good hunting reference for the
I knew
listeners who have no idea.
Because you memorized the
what we're
entire
talking about.
script.
These guys are, these listeners are so young, they don't even know what we're, that's what I've realized.
Yeah.
Three quarters of my movie illustrations are irrelevant to, like, one of our up and coming leaders. I was talking to her the other day and I gave her some reference. These people don't know, Carey, these people don't know. Are you ready for this? Okay. This is a 27-year-old leader in our church and she's going to take over the universe one day. She's amazing. Her name's Morgan. She's great. She's a great preacher, great thinker, has a podcast, all that stuff. I said something about I don't even know what it was. I referenced like a Rob Bell thing. Okay.
And she's like, who's Rob Bell?
She doesn't even know who Rob Bell is. Wow. I mean, this is where we're at.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
This episode brought to you by Rob Bell's latest ministry. So she doesn't, they don't know.
No, I know.
I mean, we've been.
Like the 90s is a memory for me.
The emergent village and all this. They don't have a clue what we're talking about.
No.
Well, what about the emerging? I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, it's, So I'm sitting there giving an illustration about Forrest Gump's leg braces coming off and how you got to, the sin that so easily entangles, and they have no idea what I'm saying.
She thinks you're talking about Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, it's like, who's Forrest Gump? What are you talking about? Anyway, sorry, we got off on a tangent.
No, we're twice as hard on your character as you do on your competency. I don't know how we got there.
Yes, and you have this great line. I don't know where you got it. Competency gets you in the room. Character keeps you in the room. And I cite you in every conference that I speak at. I cite you with that. I don't know if you came up with that or read that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Let's keep it in your camp. It's genius.
I did write that.
It's genius.
TM. But no, I thought about it.
Competency gets you in the room. Character keeps you in the room. Talk about that.
Well, because so many of the leaders at my age, I'm 59, who could have still been in the room, smartest of a generation. Some of that, like honestly, super intelligent, knew their stuff, in many cases, knew their Bible inside out. What was it? It was character. It was like they were jerks, and they eventually, their boards fired them. They slept with people they weren't married to. They took money that didn't belong to them. They breached trust. Those are all character issues. And you know what? Like a couple of books in there on character, but for the most part, no course is going to make you better. No. That's time on your knees. That's time confessing your sins.
And I always say, when Paul's talking about this in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, and he's saying, here's what an elder is, here's what an overseer is, here's what a deacon is, however your tradition translates all these words, here's what a leader is. He, in the 11 characteristics that he gives, 10 of the 11 are all character issues. Only one is competency. Able to teach, everything else is character.
You're right.
You're not having sex with people you're not married to, you're not a lover of money, you're not a this, you're not a that. And that's leadership.
The fruits of the Holy Spirit are all character traits.
Yeah.
Like, of course we want people who are kind, gentle, patient, loving, with self-control, all of that. And I don't know about you, that doesn't, the evil spirits come naturally to me. The lack of self-control, the self-indulgence, that is very natural for me. What is not natural? You got to fight for the other ones. I got to fight for them, man. So what
was this line I read the other day? It said, Jesus never taught his disciples to preach. He did teach them to pray.
That'll preach. See, we turned it into a sermon.
I know, you just turned it into a sermon. He didn't go, guys, let me teach you how to preach. He said, let me teach you how to pray, which means prayer is harder than preaching.
Yeah.
Which is true. Yeah. I just came up with that line right now. That's a little
prayer is harder than
prayer is harder than preaching.
So let me preach about that.
1,000%. You know that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It is. It is easier for me to write about something than to do it.
That's good.
So I would say that's a lesson. Twice as hard on your character as you do on your competency.
That's great.
I've hinted at it before, but this one will flow out of it, but it makes it clearer. Make sure that the people closest to you have the best experience of you.
That's great.
The leadership library is filled with people who were adored, sold millions of books, got millions of downloads, views, whatever. And at the end of the day, their wife didn't like them. Their adult children wouldn't talk to them. Their staff all quit because they were arrogant, self-righteous jerks. And I'm capable of being that person. I do not want to be that person. And so that is a daily goal of mine. That's like good. If Tony, my wife, is not having a great experience of me, something is wrong. If my kids are not getting the best version of me, something's wrong. And what gets confusing is when you have millions of downloads and you've got, lots of people who follow you, it can become justification for your bad behavior. Because you're like, well, these people love me. Well, these people will watch. Look at how many views this got. Look at how many downloads this got.
That's good.
Like, you're like, look at how many people were in the room. Like, come on, man. Do you know how many conferences I've been invited to?
Right.
Like,
this is a sacrifice I have to make for them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, they don't even like you anymore.
It's not good.
So, you can plot that out biblically. You can look at the Harvard longitudinal study of human happiness. It's the same thing. The successful people who have money and title and houses, but who sacrifice the things closest to them. They're miserable.
Yep.
Somebody living in a double wide in a rural community who has a great relationship, a long marriage, and great friendships with their neighbors. Those are the happy people.
Yeah.
Well, you were preaching on this at our church.
Yeah.
You were saying, hey, blessed are you when you're empty. Because when it comes to that, like, I need God. I am not
Poor in
naturally
spirit.
that way.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that's young leaders. What about one or two pieces of advice for older leaders?
Give it up sooner than you want to. There are so many leaders right now who are hanging on too long. Their leadership peaked 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Sometimes they need the money. Sometimes it's a case that their identity is entangled in what they do. And I didn't have a golden path in front of me when I stepped out of the lead pastor role. It was, a little bit of okay, for the next few years I'll teach, and then I don't know what I'll do after that. But God provided. And I wouldn't let money get into your calling. The other thing I would say to older leaders is really focus on finishing well. Like when I go to a counselor these days, it's all about finishing well. I've got a few decades ahead of me yet where I think I can be contributing. Yep. I've got hopefully 20, 30 years left in my marriage, before I go to the other side of eternity. That sounded weird, didn't it?
I love it.
Yeah, but like I've got a few decades left where, and I don't want to blow it. I don't want to be that guy who because I think as you get older, balance leaves you. You ever notice there's very few balanced old people? It's like you're either really happy or you're like the crotchety old man.
Right, yes.
And I am very aware that I could be that crotchety old guy.
Yeah.
Because knowledge brings cynicism, right? Yeah. Where does disillusionment come from? You know too much. And so I want to be curious.
You experience the world and you start to go, you know what? I'm cynical because we had an experience. I had an experience. I don't know how long ago it was now, 6-7 years ago, where one of my pastors, one of these people that had been in front of my church for 4 or 5 years, they were great. They were trusted. They had a moral failure, a repetitive kind of pattern, and it was a big deal. And it's almost like something in me broke where I went, I always build this into my leadership talks now when I go I was meeting with 40 pastors right near San Francisco a couple months ago. And I actually edited my talk and I put in the 11th characteristic of a good leader. And one of it was don't let anything surprise you. And it was basically believe your own theology about the depravity of humankind and don't let when one of your staff members fails you and totally messes up their life. Don't let it go, oh my goodness, this ruined my faith. Just really believe your own theology that anyone can do this. And that experience almost taught me that. It's like, wait, I totally trusted this. I totally thought I knew this person and I didn't know this person and they lied and they connived and they did these strategic, and it made me realize and so there's a piece of my optimism that almost got killed there. It's not that I became a pessimist. It's that I went, okay, man, humanity even Christian leaders are wonky. Yeah. And so to your point, you experience things in life and you become more pessimistic.
You can. And, I know you had that thing happen a few years ago. Earlier this year, someone really close to me had a moral failure. Well, I guess it happened a while ago, but it was revealed. And it was really interesting because it was absolutely crushed. But two things happened. When I got the phone call, and the phone call's coming, but you don't know what it's about, but it's bad. Yeah. I did a quick inventory of my life, and I'm like, oh, there's nothing there, so it must be about them. It's not. It's that, do I have a clean conscience?
Yes.
Screw up regularly, man. But there's nothing there that I've been trying to hide or bury or anything. So I thought, okay, well, that was that. And then the second thing is I was able to be devastated for them and for the mission that we were on together, but not give up on the big mission or the church. And That would be really interesting to reflect on.
That's good.
Because it would be, I wasn't like, oh, it's all Christian leaders, because I don't believe that's true.
Yeah.
I did feel empathy for the people who would read the headline and go, see, it's all Christian leaders. I know it's not. And I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. Well, it's as our experience teaches us about some people and makes us pessimistic, knowing enough leaders also makes us optimistic to go, okay, this isn't everybody. Like this isn't you. This isn't. So there's a hopeful spirit to go, okay, there are some people who are actually going to make it to the end. And we've talked, like I work for Ray Johnson down at Bayside Church. Here's a man who's like still running hard, and he has more energy than anyone on the staff. He's godly. He's humble. He loves his family. He loves his wife. His character is through the roof. Nobody's a bigger champion of the people around him. I mean, and actually Jeff, the guy who took over for you, that you mentored up and took over your church very successfully and beautifully, him and I were talking about Ray today, and he's just like, I just want to be that guy. Like I want to end, not that Ray's end, but it's like I want to be that age.
Yeah, but when you're
killing
70,
it, still
you only got a few laps.
It's like, and I want to be that. I want to be like, I love Jesus. I love the church. I love the leaders around me. I love my family. My family loves me. My church loves me. All of that, that's what we all aspire to.
Yeah.
And to get to that point and be like still optimistic, hopeful, the world didn't destroy you. It's amazing.
Dude, it's work. Because the older you get, the more you know, the more grounds there are for cynicism or pride or whatever. So it's just constant work. And I'm committed to continuing to work on it.
Love it. Okay, as we wrap this up, what are you, Carey Nieuwhof, excited about for the future? You're writing, you love writing, or you hate writing? Is writing a chore or
I don't love it as much as you. I love having written.
I love writing.
I love getting in the flow.
Yeah.
I love getting in the flow. I love the idea stage. I love mostly the first draft stage.
Okay.
Editing's not as fun.
Okay.
And I love having written. Like I'm really proud of the 5 books I've done.
That's good.
And
I like that.
I'm like, okay, at your best, that was my best shot. Didn't see it coming. That was my best shot. Like I fired that bullet, and it was right at the target. May not be the target for everybody. It was the best I did.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for the future of the church. I see a new generation of leaders stepping up. I don't think there's a lot of them. That's a problem we got to do. We see what's happening with Gen Z, and there's, revival happening, and there's a seriousness, like the church is in good hands. First of all, it's in God's hands. Secondly, it's in next gen hands. One of my missions is to serve those next generation leaders and make sure my generation gets out of the way fast enough to help them take over leadership. Really excited about the future too. We touched on AI briefly. I think there's going to be a role for the church that AI is not going to replace. I was looking at coaching, talking about business decisions along the way or strategic decisions. I have a course called Breaking 200, and it's a lot of, I could teach you how to do the course. And I had a guy who wanted to be like certified in it, and really good guy, but he had never led a church through 200. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to work, because people who are trying to get through the 200 barrier in attendance, they know whether you've been there or not.
Yeah.
You either, like, if you're telling me, we're at 260, I don't think we can keep going. People get mad. People are leaving. People are saying this. I got war stories, man. I can sit down. I can show you the scar.
Yep.
I can talk about the board meeting.
Yep.
I can talk about the people who left. I can talk about the people who stayed. I can talk, I've got that.
Yep.
If you want to talk about podcasting, I can talk all day long. So AI, even in its near future iterations, will be able to write the course, but they won't be able, there's a knowing.
Yes.
There's here's an essay on being a dad of 3 daughters.
Right.
But I have no children.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I have kids, but I don't have any daughters.
Right.
But I sit down with Mark, who has 3 teenage daughters.
Yeah.
You're in it. You're in it. There's a knowing.
I got 4 mothers at home, guys. I got 3 daughters and a wife.
It's very very human, very heart level.
Yeah.
So is AI going to be
that's good.
taking away a lot of jobs? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does ministry have a future? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like as people look for the soul, as people look for the heart, it's sort of like, if you think about it, what have I done for the last 10 years? All I have is conversations and ideas. That's it. But you think about it, information is everywhere. It's exploded. We all know the stats. Yeah. I mean, it's exponential.
Doubling every 2 years or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
So it's not a lack of information that people have. What they're lacking is meaning and insight. So I've focused on providing meaning and insight. Yeah. Well, there's an infinite level for that. In fact, we cut through the noise for people. So I think AI is going to be the same thing. Yeah. And I think as people get into AI relationships, they get into AI romance, AI sex, AI leadership training, there's going to be a human thing that's just missing
AI sex,
that we can speak. Oh, dude, are you kidding me?
Don't Google that, kids.
Don't Google that. No. I've done some teaching on that. It's here. It's here.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean,
and
AI
that's the scary part.
It is scary.
And I always kind of joke to the church, like, don't we know this story? We've seen the movie. AI is going to kill us. And why I'm terrified to even say it online, because AI is going to take
They're listening.
They're listening. And but there's such rich ways we can use it. One of our pastors did a presentation the other day about how you can use it for emailing and cutting up sermon clips and, doing a whole bunch of great content and whatever. And in that way, it's going to be great. We can't hide from technology, which the church has done. I remember, both of us ran churches that did video campuses.
Don't believe in video teaching.
Right.
Until 2020, and then everyone believed in it.
Yeah, all of a sudden it was the great, connector. But we, in many ways, people who said, oh, people don't need video preaching. It's like, okay, this is what the church does. We're late adopters. We're so slow to go, oh, the press, we should print Bible. We need to leverage these technologies, but try not to take the dark side of them.
Well, and people are going to live with unintended consequences. Like you look at what social media has done to the mental health of a generation.
Yes.
And we didn't know that in 2010.
Right.
We know it now.
We know it now.
So the church can really step in and try to help people with the unintended consequences.
How do we do this? So Jonathan Haidt obviously wrote, The Anxious Generation just now. There's data coming out. This generation is more anxious than a regular person who would go in a, institution in the 1950s. The anxiety, the pressure, the technology, the information, they know a bunch of stuff we didn't know, all of that.
Yeah.
How do we navigate this? What do we do in this scenario? You told me a funny story. Tell the story about you're in Yosemite.
Oh, yeah. That's a great story. So, my wife's birthday last year, we go to Yosemite. And
which is 2 hours from me, but I've never been there. But anyway.
So we're in California with some friends, including you. Yeah. And we're like, for Tony's birthday, we're going to Yosemite. So I start getting phone calls the day before. Dude, Yosemite's closed. Look at the news. The Yosemite's closed.
I was one of those phone calls.
You were one of those phone calls.
My admin went, oh, don't send Carey to Yosemite. It's closed. I'm like, what? So I called you. I said, buddy's closed. Don't show up. Anyways.
So we made a few phone calls to Yosemite. So the information circulating was somewhat true. The reality is a part of the park was closed, but the Yosemite Valley was beautiful and it was open. So Tony and I go there right after the crack of dawn, as soon as the park opens. It's us and 18 millennials in camper vans. We have the place to ourselves. We go up to El Cap, we hike the Merced River, we do all of this stuff, see Bridal Veil, and we got the park to ourselves. It's amazing. So I'm talking to my mom because it's Tony's birthday. And she's like, we're watching the news and be careful because the river's flooding. And I'm like, Mom, I'm standing at the river. I'm in no danger, but the river's flooding. And
careful, Carey.
Carey. And I'm like,
Carey. Is your mom talking like George Costanza?
No, she's not George Costanza.
Carey, don't go to the river.
I told you not to let him go. That's Frank Costanza, two of my favorite characters. Again, nobody listening.
See, there you go. No, they're going to be like, what's that? What's a Costanza?
What's a Costanza? Seinfeld's 30 years old now.
Yeah. Anyways, all right,
so anyway, no, but she's like, I'm like,
screaming at you to be careful, don't fall in the river, and there's nothing.
In case of my mom, she's talking to me. But yeah, you're right. And there's nothing. And I'm like, so I sent her a picture. I think I FaceTimed her. I'm like, look, it's just a raging river. We're fine.
But she's watching the news.
Nobody's being
too much
swept
information.
away.
We know every convenience store that gets robbed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Every time the queen has a sniffle.
And it's every bit of information
we know too much.
we can do nothing about.
We know too much.
And so we have all of this anxiety that social media is producing.
Yeah.
And the thing about AI, it's like, the unknown unknowns. We don't know what we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. But we have to be ready. And what that means is we have to be students of it. We have to be open. I'm doing more interviews on AI. I'm reading about it. I'm studying it. I'm using it. Yeah. And then we have to be ready to pastor people who are struggling with some of the implications.
When you get on a pod, do you, you don't have to totally tell the 100% truth here, but do you read the books of these people that you're interviewing?
No, I'll be transparent about that.
Do you prep 95 questions? Do you chat GPT? Do you just riff and get in the room with them and start going? What's your prep process? What is your...
It varies by guest, so a mixture of all of the above.
Of course, when you have me on, you read my book.
I've read your book.
Very in depth and
thank you. Of
course.
Thank you for only writing 2. Made it a lot easier. Okay, I know the 3rd's on the way, and I've already read the intro.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyway, no, a mixture of all of the above. So if it's a particular guest that I really want to drill down on, I will read the entire book. Yeah. I found myself a couple years ago getting almost into book club. And I'm like, wait, 99% of the people who are listening to this haven't read the book.
Yes.
So I did more of a Larry King and was familiar with enough with it.
That's good.
Not to insult the guest. But Larry King's philosophy was, hey man, most people haven't read the book. They don't even know who you are. I'm not going to do a book study. Okay.
Do you remember that Larry? There's that classic Larry King clip where he's interviewing Jerry Seinfeld. Not to bring it back to Jerry. You remember this clip?
No, I don't.
Where he's doing his Larry King thing. I mean, it's a great clip and it's shared all over the place, but he's doing his Larry King thing and he's saying, so Jerry's done the final episode. The show's been off the air, it's going off the final episode's done and about to be, whatever it was, 1999 or 2000. And Larry's like, so why did you stop doing the show? Or Larry says this to Jerry. Why'd you stop doing the show? Did you get canceled? And Jerry's like, and they're kind of joking, but it's a famous interview because Jerry's like, did I get canceled? I was the number one show on the air. Larry, how could you even... Have you been anywhere recently? Have you been out of your... We're the number... Why would I... What do you mean canceled? We're the number one... And he's kind of joking Larry, do you even know who I am? Did you do your research, Larry King? It's kind of one of those why are you asking? But it's
I got to watch that clip.
Asking a question...
Did you get canceled?
He kind of knows, but he's just asking it as an interviewer versus
after the final episode, it should have been canceled. That was a weird one. But,
So anyway, it's kind of that. You've got to put yourself in the posture of, I don't know anything. Please tell me, but I kind of do know. It's an interview.
I want to avoid that.
Yes.
I want to avoid being I'm not saying Larry King's an idiot, but I want to avoid. So Mark, if you're ever going to write a book, it's I wrote 2, you idiot. You endorsed 2 of them. You endorsed 2 of them, Nieuwhof. You don't even remember that. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. Where do you live now?
So it depends on the guest. Yeah. Sometimes, honestly, prep is 10 minutes. I know exactly where I want to go. Okay. I know that guest's life. Yeah. I'm like, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Other times, Will Gadar is coming back on the show. We're meeting my restaurateur friends tonight. I've asked them, hit me up questions for round 2.
That's great.
And it'll be the curiosity trail because there's no new book. Some people I've been waiting to interview for years. I have files of questions I just come up with.
That's cool.
In case I get a chance to interview with them. And then other times, ChatGPT. And I don't use it to get it done in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I use it because I'm like, wow, I never thought of that angle.
Right.
Never thought about that. And so I'll say, give me 25 questions in the style of, sometimes I'll feed it different styles in the style of Tim Ferriss, in the style of Ramit Sethi, in the style of, Kate Bowler, whatever.
Sure.
I'll do that.
That's cool.
And then it'll be like, oh yeah, they would ask that kind of question. That's a good question. I'll reframe it in mind.
Everyone else is doing it in the style of Carey Nieuwhof.
Well, there you go. Sometimes I do. You can do it. And, sometimes I'm like, oh, yeah, it's smarter than I am. I forgot to ask that question.
That does sound like me.
Often by the time, you got to train it because it doesn't sound like me. Ask it to write for you. So anyway, but then often by the time I'm done, I'll send 20 questions. I just interviewed Ken Blanchard this year for the first time. And he was really funny. He's 85, right? The dude is
First time I ever heard of him, I think I was at a Willow Creek Leadership Summit or something, and he spoke there. That was really cool.
Yeah. So the first thing as we're getting ready to record, he's like, So do you write any more questions? Like, do you have more questions? Because you sent a lot of questions. Are you still writing questions? He was just kind of joking around.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, I sent a lot of questions, 20 to 25.
Oh, that's fine.
But then some guests, like Andy Stanley, wants his 2 weeks in advance.
Right.
Other people are like, I never even look at him.
Doesn't surprise me.
Doesn't even look at him. But
just the style,
Andy shows
personality.
Up. But think about it. You're Andy Stanley.
Yeah, you got a lot going on.
Well, no, but yes. And, you know, why would he want to prepare to be on my show at his stage of success?
Right.
But one of the reasons Andy is so successful is he wants the questions 2 weeks in advance. He's going to think about them. He wants to be prepared. He wants to give you a great answer.
Of course.
I'm like, there's goals. Like, what a great guest.
He wants to be great at everything he does. 100%.
And he is.
Not just good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, I'm working on some big guests for the future.
Yeah.
So I can't say all of them.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So it's a combination of all of the above. And I follow my intuition and I try to make the show interesting.
Carey, I just want to say it's been 10 years. First off, what an honor to be an interviewer for you for your 10-year anniversary. That's crazy. So thank you for that because of our friendship. But you have served us well as leaders. You have served us humbly. I just respect your life, your family, your leadership. It's honestly, I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. I'm sure all of you are looking forward to the next 10 years. Thank you for what you do. This has been the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast 10-year anniversary episode. We have turned the mic on the master himself who has served us well. We love you, man. Thank you so much.